The Arizona Wildcats had a very impressive season last year compared to their expectations. This is what a lot of people thought that they were going to do in 2024, but after Fafita lost his top wide receiver, he ended up getting even better. Now, because of how disappointing they were in 2024, we didn't expect a whole lot from Arizona. I think we said that there was a chance that maybe they could have a good season, but I don't really think anybody would have predicted them to go 9-3 in the regular season, which is exactly what they did, 6-3 in the Big 12 before dropping their bowl game to SMU.
Taking a look at their offseason, as Jonah mentioned, Noah Fafita back as their starting quarterback for his senior season. And that immediately, at least for us, makes us think that Arizona can still be very good like they were last season. Now, they are losing their starting running back from last year and their two most senior wide receivers, but they do have a lot of young guys returning in the wide receiver room, as well as a couple of their offensive linemen. Defensively is where they're going to take the biggest hit. Now, they do have one of their leading tacklers from last season back and linebacker Tay Brown. But the rest of the team, particularly in the secondary, is going to be pretty gutted. So I'm going to have to see how that ends up panning out with their transfer portal class. It's not one of the best transfer portal classes, coming in at only number 51. The high school recruiting class is at 40, so overall at number 45. So not like comparing them to some of the best teams in the country. But all that being said, their additions that they got out of the portal, I think, are really going to help them. Their best overall player is Cole Rush at tight ends coming in from Illinois. He's going to be a massive weapon for Fafita to use next season after losing their previously starting tight end. But then the rest of them all coming in on defense. You got Cooper Blomstrom coming in on the defensive line off the edge. They really needed an edge rusher after losing the majority of their defensive line. And then in the secondary, they're bringing in quite a bit of cornerbacks and safeties, but the two guys that I think are going to make the biggest impact are Dalen Austin coming from Oregon in the corner position, and then Cam Chapa at safety coming in from, I'm not really sure what school that is, but I do think that the secondary position was addressed very well in the portal. So grades wise, talent going to be at a B. It's not like the greatest players out of the portal, a lot of three stars, but needs wise, I think they actually did a very good job of addressing the secondary and the defensive line through the portal. So coming in at A minus, and overall, that's going to give them a B plus grade for this offseason.
Now, looking at their schedule for the regular season, honestly, two of those first three games, those are basically free wins with Northern Arizona and Northern Illinois. Now, BYU in the middle of that, though, first Big 12 matchup, that is a brutal game to try and go on the road that early in the season to face one of the best two teams in the conference from last year. And BYU is going to be just as good this season, if not even better. They return Bear Bachmeier at quarterback. They return their starting running back. They're returning their top wide receiver. Just overall, this is a very, very good BYU team. They're going to have a great offense. It's going to give that Arizona defense a lot of problems. And then defensively, I think BYU is going to be better than they were last year as well. They're really going to be contenders in the Big 12 this season. So Arizona having to go on the road to face them this early is definitely a tall, tall task.
The one thing for that gives us the reason that it's only going to be a 40% chance for Arizona, so around that coin toss 50-50, is that BYU lost their defensive coordinator over the offseason, so maybe there's some growing pains with that this early on in the season, especially against an experienced quarterback like Fafita. Their next game, though, after that is at Washington State, and Washington State was okay last year. I don't remember if they just got into a bowl game or just missed out on it, but either way, they weren't that great of a team. Yes, it is on the road for the Wildcats here, but I do think that the experience of Fafita and this transfer portal class that they have coming in is going to be better. They also retained their defensive coordinator who was starting to hit his stride last season. So Arizona should have a pretty good chance of winning this game on the road. And then their next Big 12 matchup is against Cincinnati, who we both really don't think is going to be good this season, considering the loss of Brendan Sorsby as their starting quarterback. He's now at Texas Tech. And I think he was the focal point of their offense, and they've lost way too much this offseason, whether it's to the portal or to the NFL draft. I really don't see Cincinnati putting up much of a fight against an experienced Arizona team, especially considering the Bearcats will have to go on the road. And then their last game before their bye week is a road trip against West Virginia. West Virginia, some people were hyping them up after Rich Rodriguez came back to the program, but Jonah and I last year did not really buy into that hype, and they did not have that great of a season. I don't really anticipate that they'll do much better this year, but maybe year two under Rich Rodriguez, they start to take some steps forward. They did have some big wins, including winning the backyard brawl against Pitt early on last year. So they do have some potential, but again, Arizona is the more experienced team in the positions where it matters. So they're going to be favored in this game for us at least, but just a 75%, a little bit of a step down compared to the previous two matchups.
Yeah, and then they're going back home and facing Iowa State. Now, this Iowa State team basically lost everything. They lost their head coach and almost all of their players from last year's team, which I mean, was a decent team for sure. I think they went 8-4, didn't end up accepting their bowl game bid. But just overall, I'm expecting Iowa State to have a severe downturn this season. Really, I don't see much going their way. And going on the road to face Arizona here, I think the Wildcats should definitely be big favorites in that game. Then you go on the road to face Texas Tech. Now, Texas Tech is going to be really good once again this season. They didn't crush the transfer portal as much as they did last year, but they didn't need to as much. This is still a very solid team. I really like the addition of Brendan Sorsby at quarterback. I think he's going to fit really well into this Texas Tech offense. And the Red Raiders just have better wide receivers than Cincinnati did last year. And Sorsby was a good quarterback last season. So I really think that that could potentially elevate this Texas Tech offense to something that maybe can actually compete once they get to the college football playoffs, should they make it that far. And then TCU at home. Now this one's at 60%. TCU lost Josh Hoover to the transfer portal. He ended up going to Indiana, but they brought in the Harvard quarterback, who a lot of people were really talking about as having a good chance of being one of the best quarterbacks in the class. I think it's similar to like a Trinidad Chambliss type, as far as his ceiling. And if he does that, TCU is going to be really good. I feel like they're going to be decent enough to make this game competitive, but with Arizona having more knowns at this point, we're going to go ahead and lean towards the Wildcats at home in that game.
Then they take on Utah, and the Utes are going to be a little interesting this season, considering that Kyle Whittingham left the program and is now the head coach at Michigan and took a good couple players from the program to Ann Arbor. Devin Dampier is still there, and I think with him back along with Wayshawn Parker in the backfield, I do think this offense is still going to be very, very good. The concern is more on the defensive side of the ball because that's where Utah lost most of those players to the transfer portal. If they're able to build that roster back up with guys that stayed at the program or guys that are bringing in through the transfer portal, then sure, Utah can be just as good as they were last year. A team competing for a Big 12 title and maybe that college football playoff spot. But again, we know more about this Arizona team right now, despite the fact that they have so much to replace because they have their starting quarterback and their head coach returning. And it is at home, so we are going to slightly favor the Wildcats here, but this is going to be a really good game when this game ends up rolling around later in November. Then they're on the road against Kansas State. And Kansas State brings back quarterback Avery Johnson after quite frankly, a pretty disappointing season. We had Kansas State as one of the best teams in the Big 12 last year, and they fell well short of those expectations, not even making the Big 12 championship game or in playoff contention, getting eliminated pretty earlier on. But I do think that this year they will be back. I think with Avery Johnson back, it definitely helps their case because, again, starting quarterback continuity helps. And he was still a very solid quarterback. It's now just making sure you're surrounding him with good enough weapons, and the defense is also going to step up. So I do think Kansas State can make a run this year. Not necessarily saying they're going to be one of the best teams in the Big 12, but definitely one of the tougher games on Arizona's schedule. It is on the road too. But again, Arizona was good last season. Kansas State was not. We're going to slightly favor them here on the road as of right now at 55%. And then the big rivalry game against their in-state rivals in Arizona State. And It's going to be a completely different Arizona State team. The Sun Devils losing Sam Levitt as the starting quarterback, Jordan Tyson at the wide receiver position, along with just a lot of other players. But I do think that they're still going to be a pretty solid team. I think they showed flashes throughout last year when Sam Levitt was down with injuries, and they could still be a very competitive team and give Arizona a run for their money here too. But I think the tide is starting to shift in Arizona's favor. I think they have had a lot of consistent seasons over the years in that they might actually be the favorites in this game, especially at home against the Sun Devils. So 60% chance for Arizona to win that game as of right now. But all in all, a pretty solid year expected for Arizona from us.
Yeah, I mean, after going 9-4 last season, I think 9-3 would be another really good season to follow that up. And it really shows they only need one of those games to go the other way in order for Arizona to maybe even make a push towards the Big 12 championship. So I think overall, there's a lot to look forward to for Arizona this season. Our projected win total is just under that 9 wins, down at 8.25. And I really feel like you can't get much above that just with how many close games they're supposed to have. But yeah, overall, Arizona should have a very good season this year. Plus 35,000 for the national championship odds. So basically, it's a long shot for that. But number 34, it's not terrible. In relation to the other teams that they're around, I feel like they're definitely a candidate to be a long shot team to make the college football playoffs potentially. So thank you guys for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in our next video.